A fee is also charged for each application, although the new web pages point to Texas application fee-based pages. At the time of writing, no fees have been added. So again, this is pushed back onto the sector. You want to deliver offshore, that's great. And now there's a charge for regulation on top of that.
Big milestone happened down in one of our southern capitals.
Yes. So we've obviously been talking about this quite a bit over the last year and a half or so. But the University of Adelaide is now functioning and a real live living organism.
G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm your co-host for today's episode. My name is Rob Malicki, coming to you today from Garigal Land in the eastern half of Sydney.
And g'day, I'm Dirk Mulder. I'm the CEO and founder of the Koala News. I'm coming to you from the western part of Sydney on a Dirk country. And Rob, mate, welcome to 2026.
Thanks, mate. I was cutting you off already.
I know we're 1 month out and we're already out of sync. It's incredible.
I know, totally.
Yeah.
I was going to say magnificent Durham country.
Absolutely. Magnificent Durham country that's been about 44 degrees for the last 2 weeks. It's been incredible.
I have been thinking of Dirk when we get some of those hot days. And I'm over east, so by about mid-afternoon we get the sea breeze. And I've been thinking, oh yeah, out west, Dirk is going to be stewing today.
Yeah, and look, for those Sydney-siders, you would be well aware of a thing called Bondi, which is the Penrith Beach. It's obviously a bit of a crack on Bondi, but mate, I tell you, it was a godsend for many, many days through that hot period. And while it might not be the most salubrious of places, it's actually not bad, mate. There's a kind of a lake in the lakes complex there where they've put in a beach, and there's a view of the back there of the Blue Mountains Escarpment. It's actually really good, and give it a few years, put a bit of infrastructure in there, it's going to be a really, really great little spot. So looking forward to that over coming years where it becomes hotter and hotter.
You know, I used to take a lot of my family holidays up in the Blue Mountains. So I've got that image in my mind as you're driving out towards the mountains and they sort of rise up off the plains and you see the escarpments coming up. That gives me goosebumps every time. And, you sort of head up either Bell's Line of Road or up the Great Western Highway into the mountains. Yeah, I just love it. It's a great part of the city. Yeah.
One of the things I did last year was actually join with a couple of guys that I went to school with, and we go walking around the river every morning, and you get a really good view. Like going around the river, you cross two bridges that obviously over the river. One of them's the freeway bridge. When you get up on that freeway bridge and you see the mountains there, and it's early in the morning, the sun's coming up. In winter there's a bit of fog around. Mate, it really is a beautiful sight.
It does tell you just like what a remark. And this is not just Sydney exclusive, but I'm talking about Sydney. But Australia, our big cities do have this incredible diversity. In Sydney, the oceans to the mountains. You've got all these incredible little cultural pockets all over the place. We were just saying recently, man, we really need to take the kids out to get them to have a look around like Auburn, which is like inverted commas, Turkish area, and out to Cabramatta, inverted commas, Vietnamese area, just to explore these different parts of our city. You don't have to jump on a plane to get us out these days. You've got some amazing experiences just here in our own city.
And to bring it back to the context of international education, I mean, I know when I was at Murdoch, we used to invest a lot of time and effort into ensuring that students were familiar with the city that they were in. And, we'd have, or even the state, we'd have a great north trip. We do orientation at Cottesloe Beach, like all of those kind of things all come together to make sure that students have they're not just living in a little pocket in a city somewhere or in a suburb, but they're actually getting out and having an experience as well. And like you say, that every city around the country has such a unique landscape and such a unique cultural kind of experience around that. So it's, mate, I think we still do live in one of the luckiest countries in the world, and that's part of it.
100%. And my friend, we have a lot to discuss. Things certainly haven't completely stopped over the Christmas New Year period. Where do you want to start? Starting with PRISMS. Before I set you loose on that question though, Dirk, before we talk about PRISMS, just really quickly, for those people who are new listeners or who aren't familiar with it, PRISMS is the Provider Registration and International Student Management System, so the technology that sits behind visa processing and international student management for institutions run by Department of Education and assessment levels run by Home Affairs. Essentially, it's the framework that determines what documentation and visa evidence students need to provide when applying for visas.
Yeah, I think to most people's surprise, there was a note that popped up on PRISMS, I think around the 8th of January, whereby the Department of Home Affairs have reviewed the South Asia assessment levels, and surprise, surprise, I think just about all of them changed and went down. So we had Bangladesh.
Some significant movements here, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, and look, some surprising, probably some not. A lot of this is, from what I gather, a lot of this is based on Julian Hill's trip to South Asia, and I want to come back to that because I think there's a really important point here. But let's just run through the changes. Bangladesh has moved. So to preempt all of this, generally as to my knowledge, assessment level changes are done twice a year, generally on a rotation. Now, I may be slightly wrong with that, and I think they've moved timelines over the last couple of years, but generally twice a year you would expect that these assessment levels would be reassessed. This seems to be out of cycle, so to begin with. So that's probably the first point. So these South Asia changes, again, on the back of Julian Hill's trip to South Asia in early December, looks like they've changed. So Bangladesh has moved from AL1 to AL3. Now, the star or the asterisk on this one was Bangladesh went up to AL1 in September when they were last done. So this is an interesting move, and they haven't just dropped one level, they've dropped two levels. So whether there's some background data there that we really need to get across a bit more as to what's been happening in Bangladesh, it's kind of strange. Bhutan has moved from AL2 to AL3, India's moved from AL2 to AL3, Nepal has moved from AL2 to AL3, and Sri Lanka has moved from AL1 to AL2. Now, the couple of points that I want to make about this. One, when assessment levels change quickly like this, it makes it really, really difficult for institutions to, as the government would say, fish in the right ponds or try and attract students from the right programs. So I would say, in September, the government signalled by moving Bangladesh to AL1 that it was a low-risk country, and this is a country that you should be recruiting in your students from. And then to move it to AL3. So no doubt the sector's looked at that and gone,
later.
Great flag. Yeah. Thank you, Home Affairs. Let's go and look at Bangladesh. What are we talking? 3 months? And suddenly it's dropped two levels. And when it drops two levels, the government's obviously signalling that that this is not a good market for you to be recruiting from. There is potentially fraud. There is potentially, significant visa rejections coming from that country now. And so it goes to show the erratic or inconsistent nature of the system and how institutions respond to that. And I think that's a really difficult one for institutions to get your head around, because how do you move your recruitment strategy every 3 months if this is going to be the case? Now, in saying that, and if there is significant fraud or there is significant concern from the department, rightly so. They've moved the evidence levels. However, it makes it a really, really difficult system to work within, right? And I think we've spoken about this before. I hate to use the word business, but in any, organizational context, consistency is key. You want to know where you're going to plant your foot, in the next iteration to make sure that you've got that confidence that you can operate effectively. When these things happen, that makes that really, really difficult. So it's a fascinating one. The second point that I want to make is there has been, I guess, discussion around this has stemmed from Julian Hill's trip, from his meetings in South Asia, particularly with Home Affairs people on the ground. That's well and good, but if that is the case, and I don't want to blow this up to be bigger than Ben-Hur, but surely the departmental system should be better than a minister taking a trip, hearing firsthand from people on the ground, and then suddenly assessment levels change. Surely we must have a more robust system than for that to occur and for that to be the trigger of an assessment level change. So
I think that's right, isn't it? I mean, it's okay. New information comes to light. Of course, any good organisation should respond to the evidence they have in front of them. But when we're talking about such a short time period, and let's face it, those meetings at those senior levels, minister going out into the world, having conversations, they're very top level. There shouldn't be any surprises coming out of those kinds of visits when a minister goes and meets with counterparts in other countries. Usually all of that stuff has been discussed in advance between agencies and bureaucrats behind the scenes before a minister steps into a room, because they hate having surprises.
Oh, and mate, you've worked in a university. It's a bit like, when the Vice Chancellor takes a trip somewhere and suddenly you're off doing something completely different to what your strategy says because the Vice Chancellor's had a couple of meetings somewhere overseas and suddenly the whole institution is going in a different direction. So it's what it needs to do.
Makes it hard. It's just hard.
It's hard.
Right? Like, let's make this, we have been talking about this for the last 18 months. It's the whiplash that's just giving everybody, I'm going to go with that analogy. The whiplash is giving everyone a little bit of a pain in the neck.
100%.
Do you like that?
I love it. I love it.
Do you like it?
It's a great analogy, and it is right. It's a consistent whiplash. So again, when these all get done again, probably in March or April of next year, then there's a whole new set of sort of operating standards that people need to take into account, and maybe that's just part of the game these days. I don't know, but it's difficult to work within. That's for sure.
Well, any kind of reactions from people in relation to this?
Yeah, so look, when I ran the story about the change, I spoke with Phil Honeywood and Ravi Singh from Global Reach. They both had very good views on it. Phil, obviously spoke a little bit about a call that he had with the minister in the preceding days to flag this. Phil was obviously on the trip to South Asia, so he understands. I think his main point was, as we've spoken about, that the consistency nature, and when these things change quickly, it makes it really difficult to operate. Clearly, where with the changes that are going on globally with the Big Four, be that USA, Canada, the UK, and Australia, we're now seen in that context. And as Canada is essentially Canada's closing right up, and the UK has been more difficult, as with the US, what was probably an objective long-term strategy for Australia is now being seen, or there is a perception that Australia is now potentially a little bit easier than those other three major destinations. So when you benchmark against other places, then you do that. I guess my point to that is, well, they let them do what they do. We need to be consistent and true to our own offer. And if we think our own offer is strong enough, we shouldn't be necessarily, navel gazing our competitors, and just because they've got troubles that we tighten up or loosen up or do those things. And again, it goes back to the authenticity around that visa program. And if you think, one of the major concerns that people that I've spoken with have raised is, if you go back to COVID, the same applications were getting through because we needed students. And suddenly policy changes where, hang on a sec, we don't need as many students. And suddenly those same visa applications are being rejected. And what we need is an objective system, not something that's going to knee-jerk to either competitors or to supply and demand. We need to be true to those systems, and we need to be stand behind them and make sure that they're robust.
Okay, Dirk, so if I say that, it's going to sound whacked out too. Has this been picked up by the mainstream media?
Mate, it happened, yeah. So news.com.au actually picked up this story, and the journalist was Frank Chung. And I actually reached out to Frank just to say thanks for covering the story, because we don't get too many accurate reportings of our sector in these nuances. So Frank did a really good job at presenting it. So I reached out to him, got a nice note back, which is even better. Sometimes you contact journalists and, there's a bit of a black hole there. But yeah, he was very complimentary in writing back as well. So that was great. Interestingly enough, there's been a lot more reporting in the mainstream media over this. I shouldn't say a lot more. There's been a couple of stories, right? But there's probably a lot more than what we're used to, unless there's something major going on, or Pauline Hanson does something silly or whatever else. But 7 News sat down with Phil Honeywood. 7 News has a current affairs program called The Issue, which is probably, a little bit more about a one-on-one sit down. So Phil Honeywood sat down with Channel 7, and I think it was about 35 minutes or so where, a series of questions was asked to Phil. And Phil, I think, did a really good job at walking through where the sector's at, why it's there, what some of the issues are behind it. If you haven't seen it, I will write this up and put it up into a Koala News story in the next couple of days. So by the time this drops on Friday, that story should be up. But if you haven't, if you can't find it, it's on YouTube, 7 News The Issue. And if you Google that, you should be able to find it. But yeah, really, really good kind of sit down with Phil. And I think, again, when we think about social license and where we're at with those kind of things, these are the kind of things and the talking points that Phil made through that. It needs to be widely available to journalists, to politicians,
100%.
Stakeholders, and to people within our own sector that talk about these things regularly. But yeah, really, really good. And I think a really good one for anyone who's interested in international education, or the broader discussion around net overseas migration to actually have a sit down and listen to.
We're lucky to have a former state Minister for Education as the CEO of our International Education Association, because half an hour with a journalist, like, you're under the pump there.
Yeah.
Some of those questions in that interview are pretty direct and curly.
Yeah.
And, I think Phil certainly understands the necessity to have that clarity of message, the simplicity of the message and what have you. And actually I was looking at that article, you sent it through to me from Frank Chung. And as I read it, I'm like, yeah, this is a pretty good article, fair and balanced. But it's also, I'm reading that with an international educator's frame.
Yeah,
and go through it, and there's stats and figures and assessment levels, and you know what? I think this is part of the problem we face, is that Joe Blow public, when you start talking about all this stuff, they're just like, boom, zone down.
Yeah, brain explosion. You're right.
It's
too complex.
It's too complicated.
Yeah,
too complicated. And once again, storytelling. You and I were talking about this before we started recording. The way that our industry, not just international ed, but higher ed in general, the way we tell our story is so critical. And when we see this complexity, it's not a forward soundbite. That makes it very hard for us to penetrate the psyche of your average person on the street.
Yep, 100%. I mean, at one point, Phil makes a comparison between UK backpackers and international students, and talks about the numbers that are coming through and how UK backpackers have doubled in numbers. What actually is their contribution compared to, say, an international student, and how do they go around? And that key point of 70% of students return home after their studies. Like they're as you say, those 4-word sound bites that we need to be able to grab and put out there, and the overly worked up notion that international students are taking houses and there's so many of them. We need to be able to break that down simply. And I think, as I said, Phil, I think, did a really good job of that in this interview.
Absolutely. Let's move on to ATEC, the ATEC bill, which is talking about including power, or includes capping powers, so the ability for the Australian government, the minister in particular, to cap international student numbers. But there's a but in here as well.
Yeah.
This is complicated too, right? Let's get to talk about an issue that, as specialists, mate, we're across this, but Joe Blow doesn't understand this at all.
Yeah. So, look, firstly, massive acknowledgement to Andrew Norton. Andrew wrote a post on this on LinkedIn that I saw, and obviously Andrew's been a great supporter of the koala. So I reached out to him and said, would you mind if I either republished it or would you mind tidying it up? And he said, mate, happy to koalarise version. So he did. This is really, really important. So in the story of capping, this has been going now for some time, and clearly the government has been keen to limit, through the visa process or through institutional access to international students, the amount of students that each institution can get. It started off with that bill, what's that now, 2 years ago, or December of 2024, which failed, about capping and all of the legislative process that went through that. We've now got a system where that's done through allocated spots or allocations. Andrew picked up, there's a bill to create the new Tertiary Education Commission before Parliament at the moment, and Andrew picked up that within that, part of the role is to give institutions, again, a allocation to allocate a maximum number of international students to ESOS registered providers at the direction of the minister. So this is going to be, if this bill gets through in its current form, is going to be a function of the new ATEC. The complicating matter, so this is what's there. So we're now looking at another legislative instrument to potentially change what we have now and move into a Tertiary Education Commission now allocating those caps at the direction of the minister. The interesting bit is that this is as my read of it is, this is the only function of international education that ATEC will have. So as Andrew points out, that's going to be a real issue, because why would you give ATEC just this, but no other purview over this area? So I don't know.
I could guess at that. I could guess at that because they want the decision being made in the minister's office, essentially, then handed out for a rubber stamp. Right.
And then that creates, I guess, a question of what is the relationship between the minister's office and ATEC? And ATEC's meant to be an arm's length kind of organisation. So there's a whole bunch of questions I think that this brings up. But I'm not sure, mate. It's a watch and see again, and interesting. What I did see, and again, mate, this is Facebook, right? There was I can't remember who it was. It was a Liberal member who put up a little snippet, and he was talking about the amount of new laws and regulations that Labor government have brought in. And it jumped out at me as someone in this sector who, has been watching increased regulation, and I know that this goes across other sectors as well. And I thought, you know what? Maybe there's something to that. And I don't, again, if these things are good, then that's a good thing. The view that this Liberal member was bringing across was there's just way too much red tape coming right across the economy, right across everything. And I don't know, maybe there's something to that, maybe there's not. But again, this is a really good example of, we've transitioned, the Labor government wanted to bring in a notion around capping. They couldn't do it through legislation the first time. They've adapted it to have a system where they can still do that or pull strings to do that. They don't seem to be happy with that now. Now we're moving to another system. And again, if you think about that over, by the time if this bill gets up and when ATEC's established, and we're now probably talking for 2027, we're now talking 3 years of uncertainty for the sector around a process of capping or being able to recruit international students, which is essentially a core function of the institution. So when you start thinking in those contexts, you've got a 3-year, line here where there's been a massive amount of uncertainty.
Yeah, not easy to deal with, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Moving on, so we've talked about the ATEC bill.
Yep.
Australian Tertiary Education Commission. Let's go to another government agency.
Yep.
TEXA.
Yep.
Tertiary Education Quality Standards Agency.
That's the one.
Yeah, let's talk about this. So they've released some offshore reporting requirements.
Yeah, so again, acknowledgement to Tracy Harris, who chased this story down. On the 2nd of January, of all dates, TEXA released their new requirements for higher education providers seeking authorization to deliver courses overseas. So we've spoken about this, at length. And again, when we think about red tape, is this a good thing, a bad thing? I mean, is there a sense that, if Australia is going to deliver offshore education, then obviously we want it to be quality, we want it to be the highest standard, we want it to be consistent with what's being delivered onshore. TEXA's now absolutely 100% in the area of regulating offshore delivery as well. So the new webpage outlines the assessment scope under the Higher Education Standards Framework, and it covers preparing your application, submitting your application, TEXA's assessment, finding and recommendations, decision and publication. So they're in there. The interesting bit that I got was this has been released, and this is what we spoke about some time ago. And Tracy says, a fee is also charged for each application, although the new web pages point to TEXA's application fee-based pages. At the time of writing, no fees have been added. So again, this is pushback onto the sector. You want to deliver offshore, that's great. And now there's a charge for regulation on top of that. So it'll be interesting to see and how those charges. So if we think about a visa application fee as something that could influence supply and demand, I would suggest that this is exactly the same. If you're the government and you're wanting to limit the amount of people who are delivering offshore or the amount of courses that are offshore, and again, course delivery now needs to be put through TEXA as well. You can up those charges or down those charges. So it's going to be interesting. No doubt it will start up as a cost recovery measure, one would imagine. But again, it's another point at which you would say, and given the return on investment from an offshore course perspective, this may in future be a point that you want to look at very closely before you start looking at delivering offshore. Because if you're getting an annual fee, based on the amount of courses that you deliver, and that cuts into any money that you might be returned, that's got to be factored into whether you want to go ahead with it or not.
If you think about this, registration fees, these are pretty substantial. there are fees for everything you want to put up a new course and register for this and that. And then visa application fees bring in a lot of money. I don't know, it seems, just making an observation.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know what it means, Dirk.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a good one. Again, when we talk about complexity, it adds to it, right? And if you just, and I'm sure from TEXA's perspective, they look at their own little bit and they go, yeah, this makes sense. But when you put it all together, it's, the compliance around delivering programs is growing and the regulation's growing. And again, if there are massive breaches, massive holes, then, you've got to tone that up. There would be different arguments around that around the sector, one would imagine.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
100%. Just thinking about this, so that TEXA wants to regulate programs being taught offshore. I don't know, it's like quite a lot of reach, isn't it? You've got any private company that wanted to do business offshore. You can't imagine a government department saying, oh, that's okay, we're going to look over your shoulder just to make sure that everything's... I mean, there are some requirements, actually, it's not quite true, national security requirements and the like, but otherwise, I don't know, it's a lot of oversight.
Oh, again,
it's about education here. We're not talking about building military weapons that might fall into the wrong hands. You know what I mean? No, seems excessive to me.
Yeah. Well, let's watch this one over the course of the year, because I think it will be an ongoing issue, and no doubt when IEA holds its T&E forum, this will be a major issue at it, I'm predicting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
For sure, and probably going to only get more complex as more organisations, institutions look to expand their offshore T&E operations. Surely that then gets the attention of government, if only because they can ring the cash register more times. I don't know. We'll see. It's been in this industry too long. I'm too cynical. Isn't that terrible? They say you should be skeptical, not cynical. So I should be more skeptical rather than cynical. There I'm just being outright cynical. Mate, but talking about good things, nice to finish on a nice note.
Yeah.
1st of January ticked over.
Yeah.
And a big milestone happened down in one of our southern capitals.
Yes. So we've obviously been talking about this quite a bit over the last year and a half or so. But the University of Adelaide is now functioning and a real live living organism. Adelaide University is now live. combining the University of Adelaide
You,
and the University of South Australia. So it's now a live, living, breathing organism. And congratulations to all of those people who have been involved in that amalgamation. It's been really interesting. The advertisers run a number of stories that I've picked up on already. The incoming Vice Chancellor's salary has been mentioned. Talking about the great bet of South Australia. So it's interesting. I think whenever something like this happens, there's always going to be a multiplicity of angles that journalists will write from. I think in this podcast, we just say congratulations, and let's see how this goes over the next 6 to 12 months. And we wish everyone there well. Who there's a number of people that work there that we know well. So good luck with everything, and let's hope that the first 12 months is as smooth sailing as possible. Lots coming together, lots of new programs, lots of new systems, all of those types of things. So yeah, best of luck to Adelaide University.
LinkedIn feed just lit up, like everybody just posting, oh my God, we've been working on this for years. Yeah. And, like even I was getting a little bit emotional seeing photos of the buildings with the new branding on it.
Yeah.
That kind of makes it real. I guess people have been working on this for years now, and suddenly it's got a new brand. Like this is literally these two institutions coming together. Yeah, wow.
No, I was going to say, the one thing I'm really looking forward to is when the rankings come out and see whether, that combined research effort, all of those things actually will make a difference to the two institutions, or, the higher ranked institution, which obviously was the University of Adelaide, but UniSA not far behind, whether that actually pushes them up in the group of 8 standings internationally, or whether they kind of hold. It'll be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see. That was certainly one of the key topics around the merger, was around, having a major institution for the state and being able to compete globally. So to see the impact of that in the first, definitely the first ranking, but maybe the first couple over the next couple of years will be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. My point of curiosity as well is like, what happens now to Peter Hoy and David Lloyd, the vice chancellors of the former institutions? Are they just kind of like, job done? Okay, see you later, guys. We're going to.
Well, mate, I think the tour down under kicks off fairly shortly. I reckon you'll see Peter Hoy on the sidelines there quite a bit. And I don't know what David does in his spare time, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, be interesting.
It must be like, you've led, and I'm just taking those two gentlemen. Obviously, there's been a massive effort to bring this thing together. It's not just two people, but to have been at the forefront of bringing these two organisations together. New Vice Chancellor coming in to lead the new combined organisation, and suddenly you're kind of like, oh, I'm out. Like these organisations, these universities that they've been running for, they've both been there a long time. David Lloyd's been there a long time, Peter as well. Yep. Suddenly you're kind of like out completely. It must be a strange feeling.
Yeah, I would imagine. And look, I mean, not for me to say, but, Peter's probably coming towards the end of his career. David's still got a lot to contribute. David's obviously been a very, very successful Vice-Chancellor, so it'll be really interesting to see where he pops up and what demand might occur for his services. 100%.
Moving west to merge universities over in Western Australia. Speculation. As it turns.
Are you starting a rumour mill, Rob?
I don't think I need to start it, mate. It's just pushing the ball along. For those people who don't know, like the rumours are running hot. I mean, then there's in fact active discussion behind the scenes, from what I understand, over in Western Australia to merge off a couple of institutions over there. I'll just leave it at that for now, but it wouldn't half surprise me if that were to happen. They'd at least be looking very closely at how Adelaide Uni goes in the next 12 months to see what that process delivers.
Yeah.
And then probably asking some questions as to whether or not that's going to be viable out west.
Yeah.
I reckon that's about us for today, don't you, Dirk?
I think that, mate, that sums up the first one back for 2026 quite well.
Coming up for you in the next sort of couple of months, anything big on your radar?
Oh, mate, honestly, I actually will be back at the desk next week. I'm still off this week, so I'm going to get back. I'm going to start planning Universities Australia Conference in February in Canberra. So I'm hoping I'll be down in Canberra for that. That'll be great to catch up with a whole bunch of people and really, I think, spend the time at being able to kind of focus on university-related issues, and there's a lot of those going on at the moment. So I know the guys at UA are busy planning that. So that's something to look forward to. In March, I've got some work and some sort of sideline work coming out. the koala will kick on. I've got a bit of redesigning to do. Every year I like to kind of refreshen the newsletter branding and that sort of stuff. So I'll be doing that finishing that off over the next couple of days. And then, yeah, mate, looking forward to getting back into a big year. Hopefully having the koala grow and maybe add another vertical. So watch out for that. But yeah, some really good conversations and all really positive stuff. So looking forward to hopefully another big year.
Sounds good.
How about you? Tell us about choosing
Awesome.
uni and tell us about this digital forum that you're going to be running.
Yeah, thanks. Look, choosing your uni, continuing to grow. We've got our first partnership signed at the end of last year. It's really exciting. They will be announced shortly. And yeah, super pumped about those. But yeah, the big thing I'm working on almost for the next 4 months is a big national virtual expo, Choose Your Uni Expo, and really looking to just serve across the board prospective students, whether they're domestic, international, undergraduate, postgraduate. This is sort of for everybody. And as far as I'm aware, nothing like this has been done before, where literally we're going to have sessions on every single institution, whether or not they are actively participating or not. So institutions can sponsor and present their own sessions, but otherwise we are literally going to put together sessions on every single institution, as well as all the framework stuff that you expect, how to pay for your studies. Fingers crossed, got an announcement around participation from government as well coming really soon to present on the sort of government initiatives and things like that. Yeah, it's going to be massive. So a big focus for me for the next few months. And mate, I'm just really excited. I love content creation, as you know, just love it, the reach, the value. So to basically have that as my focus for the next 4 months and about this area that we're so passionate about, higher ed, we change lives. So to be doing nothing but talking about that for the next 4 or 5 months is a great privilege for me. So that's what I'm getting into. But with that said, mate, I know we need to let you get away to enjoy the rest of your holidays.
Thank you.
Because once they're over, mate, they're over.
It's true.
So for all those people listening along, if you're already back at the desk, I hope you had a great Christmas and New Year and that you're frothing for a big year ahead. And thanks for joining us in this first episode. Dirk, great to chat, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.
As always, thanks, Rob.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Global Horizons podcast, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Search for Global Horizons podcast and then just pop in your email address, and that way you will never miss out on all the critical international education news that you need to stay up to date with. This episode has been produced on Garigal land in Sydney. Our video and audio editor is Len Zamora, and I'm your host, Rob Malicki. Have an awesome day. See you in the next episode.